Back on June 19th, my sermon title was, "Can My Attitude Change My Day?" The sermon title for this evening is very closely similar to that, but it's a different type of lesson. And this is how my attitude can change my day. These two ideas go together. Thoughts and attitudes go hand in hand. What changes my attitudes? How do I go about changing them? It's not nearly as easy as changing my behavior. I can change my behavior because of a number of different things. Pressure from the outside, the thought perhaps of losing a friend, maybe losing a job. There are a number of things that might cause me to lose my behavior, to change my behavior. But changing my attitude is quite different, because changing my attitude has to do with what's on the inside of me. My mind, my feelings, my emotions, my values and things like this. And so the question comes up, how do I change my attitude? What are the forces that help me or perhaps hinder me from changing my attitude? And attitudes may change from good attitudes to bad attitudes, just as well as from bad attitudes to good attitudes. These things form a part of my personality. In a psychology class, when I took adolescent psychology, I asked the teacher one evening after the class was over, I said, is such and such a thing, he had been talking about personality, I said, is such and such a thing, and we gave an example, is that part of my personality? He said, Jack, everything you do and everything you are is part of your personality. And I've thought of attitudes right along this line a great deal. Attitudes cause us to become or to be what we are. So what do people see in my attitude? Do they see people of graciousness, people of kindness, people who genuinely want to help? Or do they see people who are reluctant really to give themselves, or people who are hostile, or a number of other things like that? So I just simply sat down and kind of made a little list of things that the Bible seems to tell us really have something to do with changing our attitudes. Well, how are they changed? One of the ways they're changed is through the things that I read. My attitudes, as a matter of fact, why do people write things? They write things so that you will change. You will change your attitudes. That's not, it's sometimes just to inform, sometimes it's just to entertain, but in the mind of the author feels like he has a message to send. And he hopes that you will accept that message. And so in some way, the things that we read are going to ultimately come into changing our attitudes. As a matter of fact, you know, when arrests are made many times, the police will go into a home and they will search that home, and they'll come up and say, oh, here are the kind of books that he's been reading. And maybe this gives an indication of what kind of an individual that person is. Maybe it says something about what his attitude toward violence is, what his attitude toward crime is, what his attitude toward pornography is, what his attitude toward immorality might be, because of the things that they see. This is the kind of things that he reads. Well, Jesus made a statement that I think is really important along this. He said, out of the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. The things that I say reflect a great deal about my attitude. Sometimes people will say, oh, I said that before I thought. Yeah, I've done that. But you know, lurking back in my mind is the attitude that really brought that thing to the surface. And so the things we read play an enormously important role in our attitudes, the formation of our attitudes, the support for our attitudes. Jesus was approached by the disciples one time because the Pharisees had been offended at what Jesus had said about picking grain on the Sabbath and eating, working on the Sabbath. And Jesus pretty well, he pretty well told them some things they needed to hear. And the disciples came and said, they were offended at this. And they were talking about clean and unclean things too. And Jesus said, let me tell you something. What goes into the mouth is not what makes you unclean. Because the Pharisees had the idea that, okay, here's somebody goes down to the marketplace. I'm Jewish. I go down to the marketplace and I pick up an orange and an apple and look at it. I put it back and I go over to another place and I handle some of the merchandise and so forth. And all of a sudden I say to myself, oh, wait a minute. The Roman soldiers around here, they're Gentiles, they're unclean. What if a Roman soldier had touched one of these oranges? And so traditions grew up about, well, when you go to the marketplace, you got to go home. You got to go through the ceremony of washing your hands, not because they're dirty, but because they are ceremonially unclean. It's a big thing with the Pharisees. And so Jesus says, let me tell you something. It's not what goes into the mouth that makes a person unclean. Here's his statement. But the things that come out of the mouth, those things come from the heart. This is what makes a man unclean. For out of the heart comes evil thoughts, and murders and adulteries, and sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are the things that make a man unclean. But to eat with unwashed hands, that doesn't make a man unclean. You see, Jesus says, like the text that we read, that was read to us just a moment ago, Jesus says, what is your attitude toward theft? J.P. Sanders, a man that some of you know, he made a statement in class one time at Lipscomb. He said, it isn't what a person knows about stealing that bothers me. It's how he feels about it. So, you see, that makes a big difference, doesn't it? What is his attitude about it? Well, the things that we read so many times have an effect on our attitudes. They affect our values. Another thing that affects our values is who are our friends. Our closest friends are the people that we sit down and talk to about our troubles, maybe. Talk to about our values. Talk to about what we like, what we don't like, what we do, what we don't do. And these are the people that are our intimate friends. And then the whole thing comes the other way too. He or she talks to you about what that person's values are. How is it affecting me? Is it supporting me? Is it making me a better person? Or are my confident friends people that really are going to hurt my attitude? Are they people who have a different set of values than I have? Now, certainly, I'm not trying to say we ought not to be friends with people who have different values than we have. But I'm talking about those friends who are our intimate and closest friends. Maybe we ought to choose our friends from people who share the values of Christianity, the values of the Lord, the values of Christ. Husbands and wives share the most intimate moments of their lives together. It's too bad when they don't share their love for the Lord together, when they don't share the values of purity and marriage together. And when we have our closest friends who are not sharing our values, a lot of times it changes our attitude toward some of these things. In Proverbs 18, there's an interesting statement. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Well, that's the kind of friend to have. A friend who shares with you, maybe not the physical DNA because you are blood brothers, but a friend who shares with you the values that you hold dear, that you hold very, very important. Friends can be so meaningful in our lives, and we need to choose our friends wisely. Another thing that changes our attitude a lot of times is the kind of entertainment that we enjoy. And we're right here, well, I better not say we, you. I live in Camarillo, but you're living right here, very close to the center of the entertainment industry, and of course some of you are involved in the entertainment industry. I'm not talking about the kind of work that you do. I'm talking about the fact that what kind of TV do you enjoy? What kind of TV do you seek? What kind of TV dominates your watching? What kind of entertainment? I think sometime that the old statement came ago that television has become a vast wasteland. Do you remember that? I'm not trying to knock television or entertainment of one sort or another. That isn't it. Because there's some wonderful things on television. There's some wonderful things on the internet. But there's some trash there too. So as I select the things that I watch, the things that I enjoy, the entertainment that I'm involved in, are these things that would build and support attitudes of goodness, of righteousness, or are these things the things that I have to fight against? A number of years ago, quite a number of years ago, there was a movie called Duel in the Sun. Does anybody remember that movie? Duel in the Sun. I remember when it came out. It was banned in some places because it was supposed to be so terrible. Well, I ran into it somewhere on the internet not very long ago, and I thought to myself, I think I'll just watch a little bit of this just to see what the difference is in today's entertainment and entertainment then that was considered so bad that it ought to be banned in some places. And you know, it was kind of strange because I watched that thing all the way through, and relatively speaking, there was very little there that really that really we would think today was objectionable. So much immorality, drugs, and the use of drugs is sometimes held up in entertainment. Violence in entertainment and so forth. I'm just saying that attitudes are very flexible in this, and so much time is spent in front of the TV for children, and they're gaining attitudes about society, about people, about values and things as they watch these sorts of things. How does attitude change my day? Well, I'm using the word day to think of one's whole life. How do these attitudes change my day, change my life? Over a long period of time, we become more and more, less and less sensitive to some of the things that are real values to us, or have been real values to us. There's one of these things that has bothered me for a long time, and that is, who do we choose for our heroes? Who are the heroes of today? I believe that this is one way that my attitudes are changed. It was said of the Dallas Cowboys one time that next year the Dallas Cowboys cannot play any games outside of Texas. Well, why? Well, because their star players have been involved in things that have ended up in court, and they're not allowed to get out of the state. Well, I don't know that that ever actually took place, but that was kind of one of the things that was going around. But so many times the sports figures of our day are people whose lives are reflecting something that we don't want reflected in our own lives. Sports figures sometimes say, well, I'm not a role model for anybody. Oh, yes, you are. You are. There are boys all over the country who look at football players and baseball players or hockey players or sports figures of one sort or another, and that's what I want to be. And they find out what kind of person that is, and well, that's okay because he's the kind of a sports figure that I really want to be like. Yes, you are a role model. And all of us are role models for somebody. We just don't realize it many times. But we have to are our role models. Numerous times when there would be some kind of a trial going on, and the Lindsay Lohan trial is certainly like this. There'll be some sort of trial going on, and there's some kind of just an atrocious thing that has been done, and people will stand outside, supporting this immoral or this this person who has been involved in some kind of a scandal or something like that, and the followers, the hero worshipers of that particular person are standing outside supporting that person. What kind of heroes do we have? The whole thing about Charlie Sheen has come up. The whole thing about so many sports figures. Our attitudes are changed because of the heroes that we have. Trying to develop habits that promote the idea or the ideal within us, rather than sort of the minimum. So I wrote down just a few things that I felt like that the Bible upholds in reference to some of these things. Be a good listener. There are so many people who need somebody just to listen to them. And one way that we develop good attitudes is to be good listeners. I think of the parable of the sower. Although Jesus was not talking about the development of attitudes, in the parable of the sower, he said, "He that has an ear, let him hear." And basically he is saying, listen, listen, listen. We have to listen to him. But it's a good thing in reference to our attitude that we just learn to listen to one another. I don't know how many times, I'm certainly not a marriage counselor by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't know how many times married people have come in to my office when I was preaching full time, and they would say, here are some problems that we're having. And come to find out that I remember one couple, they hadn't spoken to each other for a whole week. How do you solve problems when you won't speak to each other, when you won't listen to each other? And we develop better attitudes by listening to the people who have problems. Two ways. One is, it gives us a feeling of empathy, a feeling of being able to help, a feeling to say, I'm trying to understand where you are. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm trying to understand you. That gives you a better feeling, and it gives the other person a better feeling. And so this whole thing of developing attitudes, being a better listener is a very important part of this whole thing. There's another here that I'm thinking of. Be open toward investigation. Well, sometimes we kind of don't like that one. I'm very comfortable with what I believe. I'm very comfortable with what I know. And so I kind of don't want that disturbed, you know. And so I kind of hesitate really investigating. I would rather read the Bible, for example, to affirm what I believe. So I find it, yeah, I believe that. I believe that. I believe that. And then I deprive myself of the challenge of real Bible study. And so people say, well, you know, you get all tied up in what is the meaning of this word, what's the meaning of that word, what's the historical background here, what is it, and you know that's really not the thing at all. I just want to know, you know, what makes me feel better, what makes me more content. You see, that's me-centered. That's me-centered. What I need to do instead is to allow the Bible to challenge me. To say, Jack, dig deeper into this. Boy, if you really want one, go home and read the first 3 chapters of the book of Romans. If that doesn't challenge you, you cannot be challenged. Especially verses 20 to 31. I have read, I think this is one of the most complex passages in the entire Bible, but I think also it is one of the loveliest passages in the entire Bible, because it tells us something about how, getting to the sermon this morning, how grace and faith fit together, and how these things are not because we are so good, but how these things show us what God has done for us. And when I read that, I read it frequently. And every time I read it, I just feel challenged within myself to say, what do these words really mean in the real concept of the gospel? What do these words really mean in my understanding of the God that I worship and that I love? So I need to be open. I need to investigate. Dr. Baxter said one day in a class many years ago, he said, you know, there are certain things that my mind is closed to. And he said, for example, my mind is closed when it comes to theism, believing in God. I am not open to atheism. I'm not open to becoming an atheist or anything like that. But he said, on the other hand, we need to remember to be open to those things that we see in God's Word, that we are challenged in God's Word. We need to be open to the possibility of changing. And through the years, hopefully we change some of our attitudes and some of our values, because we're learning more. And we're learning more because we're digging down below the surface to see the jewels and the diamonds that are just below the surface. And those are some of the things that really change our attitudes towards other people, our attitudes toward God, our attitudes toward His Word. The whole idea of investigating means change. The whole idea of inspecting my attitudes means that I have to learn to be a better listener to others. I have to watch out about the things that I read. I have to look at the entertainment that I enjoy. I have to look at a whole variety of things. The things that I've just listed here, 6 or 7 of these things. No, this is not all there is to it. Not at all. These are only suggestive. But we need to inspect the things that that have a particular effect on our own attitudes, each of us personally, because some people are more easily swayed by this, while other people are more easily swayed by that. And what we need to do, I think, is to see how do these things affect our attitudes, and look for things that we can participate in that will bolster, that will support, that will uphold the thing that the Bible says we ought to be on the inside of us. Not just my behavior. That's relatively easy to change. Not just the way just what I do, but why I do it. And so this change of attitude can change my whole outlook on life. So some people have a very positive attitude toward God. They study, they read, they investigate. And those are the people who usually are willing to respond to the grace of God. It isn't a matter of just being baptized and getting wet. It isn't a matter of just becoming something on the outside, coming to church, but instead it's a matter of change within. It's the toughest commandment that God gives us. If you're not a Christian this evening, we're going to sing an invitation song, and as we sing this song, if you're willing to respond to the Lord and be baptized into Him this evening, we invite you to come. Let's stand together and sing, please.